Before we begin, thank you very much to Terry N for joining the Patreon campaign. Very appreciated. Thank you so much for the contribution. I don't know if you abbreviated your name intentionally, just knowing I don't use last names just for the sake of anonymity and internet and all that. But either way, convenient. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's get straight into it today without throwing in any weird plugs or any kind of updates because, well, frankly, I'm behind on everything today. But we are looking at the Machinima Transformers series, much maligned. So I kind of want I was just kind of like going through things and like potential topics, and one of them just kind of spurred this idea of remembering this show and remembering some of the choices it made, and it just kind of put me in this mindset of, I have some pent-up frustration I need to get out. TJ needs to work through some anger issues. So let's actually discuss this one a little bit, shall we? Join me for the next, 15 to 20 minutes of my mental breakdown. So let's remember where we were in the Transformers fandom at the time. We were about halfway through Transformers RID 2015, a follow-up to Transformers Prime that was far more cartoony and far more kid-oriented, hardly felt like the same universe, hardly felt like the same characters. The few limited characters it did share between the two shows, it was disconnected because they were going in a different direction, and that will happen. But it's, I don't know, for me, one of the less palatable Transformer shows, and a lot of collectors and a lot of the older fans at the time kind of felt the same way. So what are our alternatives? Well, we had Rescue Bots in its last season. That wasn't going to help. We did have the IDW comics that were in the middle of a good run. Lost Light kicked off in 2016, so good stuff was happening. But we didn't have any animation. To that point, we hadn't had any animation that really appealed to the collectors for a long time. So we were actually kind of excited for this, Like, here's a modern CG cartoon, that's going to be, directed toward us, But we know how this turned out, right? I will never forget this. So the producer of the show, a guy by the name of Eric Cauldron, actually did a little bit of a press tour to kind of hype up and promote the show. And I will never forget this quote from the interview on Uprocks, where he states that, it's not really about, hey, let's be more violent. It's just asking how sophisticated a story can we tell. I'd like to think about it as our robot version of Game of Thrones. He had the ego to compare this show to Game of Thrones. I mean, if it was the last season, maybe. But no, I understand you want to hype it up. You want to get people excited so they'll tune in. But, don't oversell yourself so badly. Don't, overshoot it. I don't know if it's because he was trying to upsell the show or if he really genuinely believed this was as good as Game of Thrones at its peak. I don't know. I really don't. Let's take it a piece at a time, though. Let's take a piece at a time. For starters, we can go what didn't work in the show, or at least a small sampling of it, because frankly, I don't have an hour to burn today. Let's talk the Combiners, since the first part was Combiner Wars, and this immediately started us off on this super weird note. The Combiners were not only treated as individual characters and not 5 components combined, they were treated as if they were a completely different species of Transformer. They were described as a different race of Transformers altogether. And apparently they were so powerful and devastating that they were just causing chaos planet-wide with their constant battling. Now, keep in mind, this is supposed to be somewhat loosely following the Generation 1 cartoon, or at least somewhat based on it. Let's remember how powerful Combiners were. Okay, they were strong. They did tend to turn the tide of a battle when one transformed, but they were defeatable. Like, every Decepticon combiner ever was defeated. If you knew how to approach them, if you knew how to get their individual components to actually start disagreeing with each other, they would destabilize. Dinobots on their own, so like more powerful Transformers, like Dinobots, Omega Supreme, etc., they could defeat combiners on their own. Perceptor beat Devastator with one shot. One shot. Granted, that was in what was the episode I never want to remember? Carnage in C minor, so not exactly the best written episode to go to, but canonically it happened. So the idea that they're that destructive is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. And the way they were treated was weird. My boy Computron got jobbed out with one blast through the chest, which in my logic says that 4 of the combiner units, 4 of the Technobots, were still absolutely fine. Victorion got an arm cut off, and at no point did that arm transform back into a robot and just keep fighting. It was weird. It's like super weird. And when Computron dies, only 1 spark comes out, not 5. Okay, and even if you go well, it's a unified spark, so if 1 dies, they all die. So you're telling me that I could have shot him through the leg and he would have died? You're telling me I could have shot him in the shoulder and he would have died like Brawn in the 86 movie? I don't think so. Stupid. Oh my god, this recording is 7 minutes in, and I've only talked about one thing so far, because it aggravates me so much. Let's talk Windblade. Granted, she went through character growth. By the end of the series, she's tolerable, but to be our first main character and have to follow her through a lot of this early stuff, oh my god, she is frustrating. She's so bitter, she is so angry, and she's not pleasant to follow as a main character through the first segment of this. Like I said, she mellows and she starts kind of warming up and kind of being a more team active Autobot, etc. But it's rough going. It's a rough time getting there. And considering this was the first time we ever got to see Windblade in animation, I take that back, because we're halfway through RID 2015. We got to see her there, and she's definitely way more tame there. But seeing it in something that was supposed to be geared toward adults, it just came across like they wrote her to be angry for the sake of being angry, because they wanted her to be kind of edgy, and it didn't work, at all. And it's, again, just rough to follow her as the lead. Same way, in the same way that, Bumblebee was written to be really gruff and antisocial in the Netflix series, kind of got the same vibe from Windblade here. Let's talk Starscream. We can talk about how many ways Starscream was written badly in this one. So Starscream acts as Combiner War villain. So he gets, so he's only around for a third of the trilogy. Keep in mind, when we open this series, it's post-war. Optimus and Megatron have both basically retired and just kind of left the planet to everyone, the 2 who are destined to follow them up, Rodimus Prime and Starscream, along with the Mistress of Flame to represent the Camians. But keep this in mind. Starscream makes a power play with the Enigma of Combination to become ultimately powerful. Why? Why does Starscream in this show make a power play when he literally leads the planet already? In the entirety of Cybertron, there are exactly 2 people, 2, that match him in authority, and he feels the need to make a power grab to get rid of both of them. They don't command you. You have everything you wanted. You're in control of the planet. You're one of the planet's leaders, but he's not the planet leader. So I guess, no, he has to make a power play, because that's what Starscreams do. They make power plays and then they get killed. That's the goal. That's what they do. But it just makes no sense in the show, because he already seems to have everything he wanted. So why screw the whole thing up? Why gamble it all away? Stupid writing. Let's talk about Rodimus Kron. So keep in mind, Fiction for years has been trying to figure out a Nemesis version of Hot Rod. I think the concept behind this one's close because he became corrupted by Unicron's spirit. So you're telling me the one who is destined to defeat Unicron and destroy him once and for all is also very easily corruptible by Unicron? I mean, it's not a twist I'm happy with. Because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. It feels forced because they really wanted an evil Rodimus to be a thing. And let's be honest. But all the way back to the original Black Hot Rod repaint, the whole reason why they wanted an evil Rodimus to work in fiction is so they had something to repaint his toys into. Can we agree on that? Because they don't really add anything narratively. He just always comes across as kind of a cheap copycat of Nemesis Prime. There's really nothing like narratively he adds to the overall fiction of Transformers, except maybe in Shattered Glass. But it just always felt like because his toy and his design is so unique, they don't really get to recast it as anybody. So this was their situation of, you know what? We're just going to make him evil. I don't know. I didn't like the twist. I didn't really like the twist. Yeah, it's not my preference. Now I said, good concept, and we'll get back to that. But as a twist, no. Let's talk Titans. So this should be the coolest thing, right? So, you know, the first time we get to see like Metroplex and Trypticon face one-on-one in animation since 1986, and it's not very exciting. At one time, Prime comments that like they've never seen chaos like this before. Meanwhile, they are stomping around in one section of the city, causing no destruction whatsoever. And while Prime is saying this, Metroplex is swinging punches wildly and missing him by a literal mile. It was not the best. Like, it felt like, and it's, you know, like I would love to see like city bots fighting it out in full CG and like fully rendered and smoothly animated. This wasn't it. These were boring. This was dull. No, and it didn't get any better when Fortress Maximus started going at it either. It just, I don't know. It was just clunky. Didn't work for me. You know, it got you hyped. It got you hyped to get to see Titans battle it out. It didn't live up to it. It didn't live up to it. Then there's this guy. So Ron Perlman as Optimus Primal was a casting choice I don't think anyone ever saw coming at the time. And his portrayal of Optimus Primal in the show is what made me so scared to see him take on the role again in Rise of the Beasts. Ron Perlman's a great actor. Don't get me wrong. You know, and I've heard him do voice acting before, and it's been okay. You'll recall let's see how many of you have been following me for a long time. I reviewed Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm once upon a time. That cartoon featured the man as Curtis Stryker. Okay, he was okay in that show. Like, there's points where his dialogue is not great, but okay, he's okay in that show. Here he is miserable. His dialogue is stiff. His delivery is wooden and mechanical in a way that you're not supposed to be in a show like this. I don't care if you're playing a robot. It shouldn't be this stiff and lifeless. And he just felt boring. Oh my God, it just felt boring. And like how he's like suddenly a chosen one. Oh my God, now you get to be Optimal Optimus out of nowhere. With no build-up or explanation. Okay, whatever. We're selling a toy. It really did feel like, hey, Primal is here, and we're making him Optimal Optimus because we have to sell the toy during Power of the Primes. That was it, right? So I didn't like him. Felt like he was forced into the show. Felt like his voice acting was forced. That said, casting Ron Perlman is kind of shocking. Really, if you think about it. In season 1, they were going for what was essentially like small-time, like, non-union voice actors and YouTubers to actually provide the voice casting for the show, which included John Bailey, old friend of mine, accomplishing his dream of becoming an official Optimus Prime. Good on him. He was replaced in the second season by Peter Cullen when they were desperately trying to get people to pay attention to the show again. But you know what? Okay, at least he made it. And you know what? Fair enough. But the casting after season 1 started getting crazy. Started getting absolutely insane. We got Jason David Frank as a Transformer. Like, well, whoever expected the Green Ranger to join the Transformer side of the toy aisle? Kind of nuts. Now, again, his performance is not the best, but, and I lead this down to, like, very bad directing, if anything. But, just the fact that he got it is actually kind of cool. Kind of like that. We got Mark Hamill as a Transformer. Keep in mind, we were kind of, like, jaded and unsatisfied with this show just going into, like, after season 1, like, really? They're going to make more after how crap season 1 was. And then they drop the poster that says Mark Hamill is Megatronus. Kind of a big deal. Now, it's kind of weird, the depiction of Megatronus in the show, because he's supposed to be literally Transformers Satan, but they gave him a backstory that made him something of a tragic villain. You literally want me to have sympathy for the devil in this story? So, weird, right? Kind of weird, but, like, okay, fine. I guess I'll go with it because it's Mark Hamill as a Transformer, and even if the director is terrible with everybody else, Mark Hamill still puts in a great performance because it's Mark Hamill. You can't get a bad performance out of the man. So that part is actually kind of cool. And there are some things about the show that were honestly kind of cool. It was cool to hear Greg Berger as Grimlock again. Now, keep in mind for this show, they did try a little bit, with the they did try with the casting. Obviously, they got some big name people in. Will Wheaton was Perceptor, like Wesley Crusher, who became like king of the geeks on the internet. He was in the show. But they brought back some old school actors. Judd Nelson came back and played Hot Rod for the first time since 1986. That's kind of cool. His performance wasn't much better than Perlman's, but it was his voice, but his voice obviously aged. That's the thing, is when you're a career voice actor, you can kind of compensate. Like, Greg Berger definitely sounds different, but he's still close enough to the original Grimlock to kind of hit that nostalgia vibe in the back of your brain. But Judd Nelson sounded completely different. You could hear all of the 30 years of age that had come since the last time that he had done the voice of Hot Rod. And that there's no stopping that. There's no stopping that. It's just nice that he was back. It's nice that he came back to reprise the role. But yeah, Greg was great. It was great to hear him on one more adventure as Grimlock and not just like a one-off like cameo spot thing. Yeah, it is fun to have him back. Other fun characters included Overlord. This being the Western animation debut for a Japanese G1 villain, I thought he was actually entertaining as like a mid-series villain, as an upgrade to Starscream and a lead up to Megatronus. I thought he did really, really well. He's got some fun lines to him. He's this like overconfident attitude that kind of works. He's actually kind of a fun villain to watch and let him play through the motions. Like, he's fine. I actually enjoyed the performance and the portrayal. I could use an Overlord like that in, like a main series, as a rival to Megatron. Not going to get that, but to wheel it back to Unicron a little bit, there are aspects to the portrayal I like the fact that we introduced the Matrix of Chaos, a evil incarnation of the Matrix of Leadership, which we do get in fiction from time to time. But this one actually makes the most sense. It's the leftover essence of Unicron, its container at least. and it grants as much power as the Matrix of Leadership does as a result, but it corrupts. So it's not that interesting as an element that's forced onto Hot Rod to create, Rodimus Unicronus. Feels forced, as said. What's more interesting is, one, it kind of makes sense. Like, if this is how Unicron was a thing in a main cartoon, I don't think I would complain. It kind of makes sense that, there's an evil version of the Matrix out there. And that could also be a looming threat for later. But the more interesting was seeing it struggle with Megatron, because, this happens after Megatron recovers from being Galvatron. So Unicron is trying to get him back in his thrall, and kind of like tempting him back power-wise, or just trying to forcibly take Megatron back. And that's a more fascinating dynamic, which does bring us to the best thing you're going to see in this show. Here's the thing. I don't think this show is good. I think the show is pretty bad, all things considered. I still think it is worth a watch just for Megatron. Just for Megatron alone. Jason Marnocha is putting on a great performance as the character in general. Such a good performance, he got to be Megatron again in Cyberverse. No, not Cyberverse. The Netflix trilogy. So good on him for leaving such a good impression with the fandom that they said, we want him back. That's the good part of the show. But the Megatron is actually, when you say like Game of Thrones or Transformers, this genuinely kind of felt it. He is a post-war Megatron who's just kind of sick of the fighting. He's willing to leave the planet to Starscream because he's just tired. He's just tired and done. He's recovered from being Galvatron. He's just kind of retired away. He's beating up Constructicons for fun. But, he's snide. He's kind of sarcastic. He's willing to play along with Prime and his plan to stop Starscream, but he's also taking like playful jabs at his old enemy. It's a fun depiction. And then you have things like he goes through a crisis of faith at one point. He's struggling with that. When Prime dies, he struggles with the idea that he now has to take the lead in order to save Cybertron. And rather than like rule through authority and fear like he did with Decepticons, he actually has to work as part of a team to make it happen. And he's aligning with Autobots to do it. It's, at the time we were doing IDW Megatron becoming an Autobot. So this kind of coinciding with that is a different take on it. No, he's not an Autobot. He doesn't seem like he changes his ideals, but he changes who he is. And a lot of it comes from just like being weird, just being like worn out from what he did as Galvatron and how the war turned out. It's a fascinating and fun version of Megatron. Genuinely watch this show just for him. He's the one reason I don't regret going through this whole series. And that's pretty much going to be it for my look. Yeah, Game of Thrones, it is not. I think it has interesting ideas with poor execution. I think it has some really bad voice acting, and I would take it down to a really bad director. It was a cheap series, and it felt it every step of the way. And yeah, a lot of really weird, questionable writing. I don't remember the series fondly. I just remember moments, and I remember Megatron, and that's pretty much it. And I think that's the best thing I could ever say about the show. So if you're ever curious about it, understand it's a painful watch. Maybe watch it in it's so bad it's kind of funny way, but don't go in expecting Game of Thrones. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you for letting me rant a little bit, as some research for one video brought up so much frustration. I had to put that video aside and go, we have to talk about this now. Thank you for letting me do that. And I will see you next time.
I'm like, I think you guys got this. I will back away, and I will see you all later.
You've got this handled.
Alafi's like, really? You're not gonna help me? Like, it's fine now.
It's like these disgusting creatures breathing down my neck, and you're all just like, I believe in you. You got this.
All right, you seem to have this. 5 minutes.